I'm Dr. Yuliia Soroka, Karazin, Kharkiv National University.
And I'm Dr. S. Crawley of University of South Florida.
Working with our co-authors Olga Dzuba, Karazin, Kharkiv National University,
and Ashley Green of University of South Florida, we are pleased to give a little preview of our recent article, Perverts or Heroes in the Post-Socialist Cold War, Formula Stories of Lesbian, Bisexual, Queer Women, and Transgender People in Ukrainian Media. Subjectivities, such as what in English would be termed lesbian, bisexual, and queer women and transgender people, are contested topics in Ukraine. We wanted to understand the narratives about these identities available in major journalism outlets in Ukraine. We conducted a discourse analysis reviewing 8 national text-based journalistic media sources to understand how these concepts are discussed in Ukrainian media. What we found is that very little discussion of these identities or topics are in Ukrainian-owned and produced media. Instead, media outlets that are Russian or US-owned comprise nearly all the discussion, and most of the topics are about events taking place outside of Ukraine. Surprisingly, Ukrainian state media did not engage in messaging on these topics. This finding suggests that the narratives available in national media in Ukraine are not by or about Ukrainians, but rather operate as formula stories.
Formula stories are not about actual people or typically told by lesbian, bisexual, or queer women and transgender people themselves, but rather exist and publicly circulating story for consumption by not LGBTQ plus people. Importantly, media outlets owned by Russia and the US contribute most of the formula stories circulating in Ukraine, demonstrating the continuing position of Ukraine as fulcrum of geopolitical contestation in the post-socialist Cold War. We demonstrate that Russian-sponsored and oligarchic media, using primarily foreign content, gravitate toward the use and reproduction of the homophobic formula story of LGBTQ plus people as outsider or pervert. A second formula story of LGBTQ women and transgender people as hero is much more prevalent in US-sponsored media, which use materials both from abroad and internal to Ukraine, highlighting the purported connection between LGBTQ plus rights and processes of Westernization, Europeanization, Americanization.
Translation is a significant part of the story for this research. 2 authors are living in Ukraine presently, and 2 are Americans living in the US. We collected the data from media sources published in Ukrainian and Russian languages, translating the Ukrainian and Russian words for identities into English, identities that do not translate directly. Importantly, this kind of translation is made public beyond the local setting, primarily in English, another feature of the importance of the notion of a Cold War. LGBTQ plus Ukrainians are active in articulating their interests and concerns and working on community building in Ukraine. But that conversation is happening more locally on social media, not via large internationally produced media outlets.
Why do formula stories told about LGBTQ plus people in Ukraine matter? Formula storytelling around gender and sexuality and the instrumentalization of LGBTQ plus lives and identities found in our data are geopolitics. In short, narratives told in mass media are part of the Cold War by superpowers in which Ukraine, rather than seen as a sovereign autonomous state, becomes instead simply a political football. There is a danger in our using the Cold War metaphor. Through such imaginaries, the people of Ukraine become the spoils in someone else's victory. Yet this imaginary is precisely what we wish to deconstruct. The first round of review notes for this article were received in early February 2022, just 2 weeks before Russian military invasion of Ukraine on February 24. We had been debating the use of terms Cold War prior to the invasion, when they were confronted with the reality of полномасштабная война, a full-scale war, which physically displaced 2 of our authors from their homes in Kharkiv in the process. We believe that our research is made even more prophetic, not less relevant, by Russia's violent incursion, in that our article points to the importance of the battle over discourse in geopolitics and the implication for addressing global conflict, creating liable lives and attending to everyday trauma. Further, as of this writing, the New York Times report that propaganda is actually being spread by Russia in several languages in Latin America and the Middle East by way of extended the war of discourse beyond traditional East-West geographies. Hence, the Cold War is expanded, not constructed.
The case of Ukraine, especially in response to violent Russian invasion, complicates typical critiques of homonationalism, in which Western LGBTQ projects often reduced to colonialist nationalist logics. Western logics of Europeanization certainly come with racialized colonial logics and are evident here. And yet, in this ongoing Cold War, now a full-scale war, Russia very clearly continues to exercise imperialism over Ukraine. Neither Western logics nor traditional imperialisms can be neatly pitted against the other for one side to win the moral high ground. Deconstruction here is our goal. Analyzing formula stories is important because perceptions spread throughout the media simultaneously direct and restrict resources for people to understand themselves and articulate their identities.
It remains to be seen how and whether LGBTQ plus people living in Ukraine can articulate sexual and gendered identities that are specific for their experience rather than the world of nested geopolitics, especially now in country torn apart by Russian violence, while seemingly also coming together culturally to resist Russia and maintain a sovereign Ukraine. With this article, we eliminate the centrality of voice by citizens of smaller nations and their tendency for this voice to be lost among the whirlwind of politics by global superpowers.
We steadfastly recognize the sovereignty of Ukraine as an independent nation, including and especially the importance of democratic self-determination for LGBTQI+ people in Ukraine. Thank you for your time. We hope you find this study useful.